Friends, we're all back together for the next episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Welcome.
I'm Dave Knapp. I'm the founder of the On the Pen podcast. It is a weekly podcast all about the news around these new medications that I'm sure that you've heard about. The Ozempics of the world, the Mounjaros of the world. Maybe you've heard it as the fat shot too from the Oval Office. But however you've heard of it by now. These medications are taking the world by storm. And I, as a type 2 diabetic, diagnosed in the fall of 2021, ended up on these medications after trying everything in my own power, my own might, and even looking down the barrel of a metabolic surgery that would have rearranged my anatomy. And my doctor introduced me to these medications, and I thought, you know what? There's no one that is giving this information from the patient perspective. Everything that's out there is for a doctor, it's for an investor, but nothing exists for the patients. And that's where On the Pen came in. So Scott, I'm super excited to be sharing with you a little bit today about what we talk about over at On the Pen, my favorite subject, GLP-1 medications.
Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Just in time for the holidays, Cozy Earth is back with a great offer for Juicebox Podcast listeners. That's right, Black Friday has come early at CozyEarth.com, and right now you can stack my code JUICEBOX on top of their site-wide sale, giving you up to 40% off in savings. These deals will not last, so start your holiday shopping today by going to CozyEarth.com and using the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. The podcast is also sponsored today by Omnipod 5. Omnipod 5 is a tube-free automated insulin delivery system that's been shown to significantly improve A1C and time in range for people with type 1 diabetes when they've switched from daily injections. Learn more and get started today at omnipod.com/juicebox. At my link, you can get a free starter kit right now. Terms and conditions apply. Eligibility may vary. Full terms and conditions can be found at omnipod.com/juicebox. Today's episode is also sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Get your supplies the same way we do from US Med.
I'm Dave Knapp. I'm the founder of the On the Pen podcast. It is a weekly podcast all about the news around these new medications that I'm sure that you've heard about. The Ozempics of the world, the Mounjaros of the world. Maybe you've heard it as the fat shot too from the Oval Office. But however you've heard of it by now. These medications are taking the world by storm. And I, as a type 2 diabetic, diagnosed in the fall of 2021, ended up on these medications after trying everything in my own power, my own might, and even looking down the barrel of a metabolic surgery that would have rearranged my anatomy. And my doctor introduced me to these medications, and I thought, you know what? There's no one that is giving this information from the patient perspective. Everything that's out there is for a doctor, it's for an investor, but nothing exists for the patients. And that's where On the Pen came in. So Scott, I'm super excited to be sharing with you a little bit today about what we talk about over at On the Pen, my favorite subject, GLP-1 medications.
Dave, I can't thank you enough for doing this. Also, I'm super not amused, but like kind of delighted watching you because you're accustomed to being on video and I'm not. I'm watching you be effusive and move around and smile and everything.
Like a maniac.
Yeah. And I realized that normally what would happen here is you and I wouldn't be looking at each other. I would spin 180 degrees, put my feet up over here and bring this microphone over and I would chat like that. Yeah. So it's really awesome. Well, listen, man, I appreciate you doing this. I wanted to do it for a couple of reasons, but mainly I'm most interested maybe in a guy like you who's not a doctor, right? Who does not have a medical background, who just found himself flung into this, who started making content and then realized that it was a business. And because of that, I think that you're steeped in it in a different way. You don't get an opportunity often to talk to people who are paying a crazy amount of attention to one focused idea. And when I realized that you're out there making like, you know, news clips about like, hey, there's a pill coming, there's this, like that's stuff we talk about here. Like, oh, I heard there's a pill coming. I heard it's going to be as effective as the injectable maybe. But I heard that from a doctor I had on like 6 months ago, you know, who just said to me like, it's coming in oral form. Yeah. And it's kind of how he put it. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, oh, it's coming fast. I want to know what that means, but I don't have the time to dig through it. Mm-hmm. I'm digging through type 1 diabetes and this podcast. So I'm here to pick your brain and everything, but I do want to get a little background first. So you said you have type 2?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes back in the fall of 2021. This was after a year of experiencing what I called narcolepsy level sleepiness. I just knew something was wrong. I thought maybe it was long COVID. Mm-hmm. And I went into my doctor's office and I said, I knew that something's wrong. What's going on? And I was having kidney stones and just kind of a host of, ailments that I just knew something was wrong. I said to my wife, I said, either I have cancer, I'm dying, or I have some sort of chronic disease. The way I'm feeling is not normal.
Right.
And I went in and the doctor checked my blood sugar. He goes, the way that you're feeling is because you're type 2 diabetic. And I said, what? Record scratch? Hey, I didn't have the typical trajectory to type 2 diabetes that you hear about where hey, your A1C is creeping up, man. Stay off the Twizzlers, whatever, Yeah. I went from 0 to 100. It had never sort of crept up on me. Never had any warning other than the fact that I have been overweight my entire adult life. And we have this type 2 diabetes in my family. I'm sort of skeptical that the coronavirus maybe kicked some people who were metabolically predisposed based upon the virus going through your body, that it had a metabolic effect on some people. But that's definitely a conversation for a different day. But yeah, I was diagnosed with type 2 back in the fall of 2021. And it was definitely a journey of, I want to try everything within my own willpower to sort of will this disease away.
How would you describe, I'm sure you've probably shared this a million times. I always end up apologizing to people first, but what was your height and weight at your diagnosis, and how would you describe your eating habits at that time?
Yeah. So my height is 5'10". And my weight at that time was 319 pounds. So we're talking about a BMI in the upper 40s, which is very, very high, morbidly obese. What I was eating, it's kind of hard to explain for somebody who's never lived with the disease of obesity, right? Because obesity is a disease. It has profound metabolic effect that make it very difficult to get your weight down. But when we talk about what I was eating, well, I had actually yo-yoed on the ketogenic diet from the time I was about 18, which is when I started really putting on noticeable weight. Even from an adolescent, I could tell I was a little chubby, carried a little bit around my midsection that friends or family members didn't. But then it wasn't until high school that I really started to see that there was kind of a separation in the way that my body was handling the foods I ate, et cetera. I discovered this diet that everybody was kind of doing back then. It's kind of like the GLP-1 of today. It was the Atkins diet. It was the low carb diet. And so I started this journey where I would get on the low carb diet and it would work really, really well for me for about 6 months. I think the first time I went on it, I had got up to 220 pounds. And the first time I went on it within about 6 months, I think I was down to 170. But, I had the metabolism of an 18, 19-year-old kid, not a 40-year-old man. Mm-hmm. But I sort of chased that because I could maintain it for about 6 months out of the year. And then for the other 6 months, I'd fall off the wagon hard. So the way I kind of describe it when I tell this story, Scott, is I would be down 40 pounds and then I'd be up 50 pounds and I'd be down 40 pounds and up 50 pounds. And there were different variations of that yo-yo, but every time on the upswing, it was up. And so first of all, just imagine what that does to your body metabolically, that swing back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for essentially 17, 18 years.
Wow.
And so that year when I was diagnosed with diabetes, it wasn't really that much different than any other year. I had just come off of 6 months of being very strict with my ketogenic diet, which is actually why I thought that I was experiencing kidney stones, because I had that happen before. But, I was minding my P's and Q's. I've never been a real sugar consumer like you may think of somebody who becomes diabetic at that age. I wasn't a candy eater, still not a candy eater. Wasn't a sugary soda drinker, although I've always been a diet soda drinker. So I wasn't kind of in my mind, even though I was overweight, I didn't really fit the bill for somebody who was going to go in at 36 and get a type 2 diabetes diagnosis. I mean, the average person might go, well, you're a BMI of 45. What do you expect? Well, I've been doing this podcast now for 3 years. I've met people who are 600 or 700 pounds that aren't type 2 diabetic. Mm-hmm. It was weird for me. It was definitely scary thing to get that diagnosis young, because you know the implications in terms of what that does to somebody's expected lifespan. And so the only thing I could think about, Scott, was my kids. Like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to whip this thing into shape so that I can be around for my kids? Because my own dad died of a massive heart attack at 54.
Did he?
Yeah. So
no kidding. My story's not much different than yours, to be perfectly honest. I never thought of myself as an incredibly poor eater. I do look back now in hindsight and realize I grew up pretty broke and we ate some trashy food that I wouldn't eat now. But at the same time, it wasn't a massive amount. It wasn't like constantly sugar or constantly this. And as an adult, a young adult, my wife and I did the same thing. We were like, oh, we'll try the Atkins diet. Yeah. And it did work. Like, I was like, I lost like 40 pounds. I was like, oh, magic. Until one day you just wake up and you're like, I can't eat another chicken wing. I've run out of things to eat, you know?
I've eaten enough stacks of hamburgers. It's just, just give me a bun.
I think when you realize you're in trouble is when you're out for the day driving around and you're hungry and you end up in like a drive-through at a fast food restaurant, like pulling the patties off and you're realizing, I don't even think this is meat. you're like, well, at least there's no carbs in it.
Right.
And yeah, so it just didn't work for me. And then I slowly began, I never had a type 2 diagnosis and I don't think I was ever actually near one. Luckily though, like I just think it's random because I'm 5'9" and I was 236 pounds when I started using GLP. You know, I know my body at that point. Like, I can't imagine what you were dealing with over 300 pounds at that height. Like, it must have been really just difficult on you and your body. And even psychologically, I imagine it was not pleasant.
Yeah, definitely the upswing and the downswing. And then you get used to this kind of cycle of positive reinforcement from the people around you. Because when you're on the downswing, people are like, you look great. And then you're kind of like, oh, what are these people thinking of me when I'm on the upswing? And then you start to worry about all the people you're letting down. And yeah.
Oh man, when the first time I went into, where did it happen to me first? Maybe it was a friend I bumped into. Then it was a post office that I only go to yearly. Like there's this one post office I used to mail my taxes. And like, so I don't see this lady very often, but it's a small post office. And I walked in and she made eye contact. She recognized it was me. Then she looked horrified. Then she got quiet. And then she didn't know what to say. And I realized, because I had been through it now twice before, I would put my hand out. I went, I don't have cancer. She goes, oh, thank God. She's like, you lost so much weight. I just thought maybe you had cancer. And I was like, I know. And I said, it's okay that you feel that way. You're like maybe the fourth person that this has happened to me with.
Yeah.
And that, to your point, what in the hell did I look like before? It's like, right, that like standing in front of her at a reasonable weight, she was like, uh-oh, this one's on his way out. So anyway, it's been very transformational for me. But I kind of want to like jump ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you start making your thing. You started on YouTube, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And tell me what got you doing that, why you did that. Today's episode is brought to you by Omnipod. We talk a lot about ways to lower your A1C on this podcast. Did you know that the Omnipod 5 was shown to lower A1C? That's right. Omnipod 5 is a tube-free automated insulin delivery system, and it was shown to significantly improve A1C and time in range for people with type 1 diabetes when they switched from daily injections. My daughter is about to turn 21 years old, and she has been wearing an Omnipod every day since she was 4. It has been a friend to our family, and I think it could be a friend to yours. If you're ready to try Omnipod 5 for yourself or your family, use my link now to get started. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Get that free Omnipod 5 starter kit today. Terms and conditions apply. Eligibility may vary. Full terms and conditions can be found at omnipod.com/juicebox. Perhaps the best gift that you can give to yourself or to a loved one is that of comfort. And this holiday season, if you use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout at CozyEarth.com, you won't just be getting something that's comfortable, you'll also be doing it at quite a discount. We can talk about that in just a moment. Right now, I want to tell you that I use Cozy Earth towels every day when I get out of the shower. I sleep on Cozy Earth sheets every night when I get into bed. I'm recording right now in a pair of Cozy Earth sweatpants. I love their joggers, their hoodies, their shirts. My wife has their pajamas, and I know you're thinking, oh yeah, Scott, well, because they sent you a bunch of it for free. They did send me some for free, but I've also bought a lot on my own. So like I said earlier, Black Friday has come early at Cozy Earth, and right now you can stack my code JUICEBOX on top of their site-wide sale. giving you up to 40% off in savings. These deals are definitely not going to last. Get your shopping done now or get yourself something terrific at CozyEarth.com. Do not forget to use that offer code Juicebox at checkout. You will not be sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I was really, really wanting to learn more about these medications and how they worked and what they did in your body. And I wasn't eager to take a drug, to be honest with you, which I think has really set me up great to lead this community, because I think there's a lot of people who are reticent to take a drug, especially for obesity. But I wanted to learn everything there was to learn about these medications. And so when I went to YouTube, or, like any good millennial, that's where we learn things, right?
Yeah.
So when I went there was a lot of really amazing stories about, hey, I lost 100 pounds with Ozempic. There was nobody saying, this is how it worked. And these were the side effects that I had. And this is how they discovered these medications. Like, all the things that I would want to know about these medications didn't exist there. And so while it started as like hey, this is me taking my first shot, look at me go, woo, it very quickly developed into, as I was reading clinical trial data, I started following the Eli Lilly earnings calls almost immediately too. And then I started sharing, because I was like, well, you talked earlier about the pills, right?
Yeah.
I've actually been talking about these pills now for 2.5 years, because they were being talked about on these earnings calls where they were saying, hey, we're in, phase 1 development for, like, Eli Lilly has this one called orforglipron, which is coming out in a couple of months here. And so we were talking about orforglipron 2 years ago, because I started to see, not only are these medications that appear to be changing so many people's lives, the ones that are here, there's medicines down the pike that are really going to help people who have advanced metabolic disease. And I've been somebody who's kind of struggled to lose a ton of weight on these, although I'm right where you would expect a diabetic to be based upon the diabetic clinical trials for weight loss. There's hope down the pike too for people who are more seriously sick. And so really just wanted to start sharing that side of it. Which is really sort of what exploded the work that I'm doing. And then one of the crazy things, and we may see some more of this in the coming months with the expansion of these drugs to Medicare. But when I first started these medications and people were learning about them, it was the heyday of GLP-1, because you could get Mounjaro without a type 2 diagnosis for $25 a month in those early days. They had a coupon.
Really? How long ago was that?
This was 2022, at the end of 2022, around the time I first started. You could literally download a coupon, and it didn't matter if you had it covered on your insurance. It didn't matter if you had diabetes. You could just take that to the pharmacy and get Mounjaro for $25. And then, of course, they, cut that off like a sieve once the word started to get out about how powerful tirzepatide, the active ingredient in Mounjaro, is at getting people's weight down. They had to pull back on the savings card because it became so popular so fast with, mind you, zero advertising.
Right.
It was all word of mouth. These drugs went into shortage. And so very quickly, you being in the type 1 world, like, I know these companies manufacture insulin all day in little single dose or multi-dose vials. Why can't they just do that? And so I actually started a social media campaign that went viral and ended up getting covered by some of the major news outlets called Release the Vials, which ultimately, through conversations with Lilly, I actually had conversations with their CEO there. They ended up releasing Zepbound in single dose vials and going direct to consumers with a cash pay price. And they were kind of the first ones to do that, even before this most favored nation stuff with the administration.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The things that I've seen it help people with, I really hope that we can get to a point. Like, I'm not confused. Let me share this with you and then I'll go backwards. 15 years, my wife works in drug safety.
Okay.
So she does kind of like the behind the scenes pharma stuff where she makes sure that, reporting's done correctly and that, things are being done the way they're supposed to, that kind of stuff. Right. She came home to me 15 years ago and she goes, Scott, one day people are going to take an injection and they're going to lose weight. And I was like, what do you mean? She goes, I saw some data. And she's like, we're working on this type 2 drug. And she was at Novo. But man, like, you should see the data on people losing weight. I really think one day people are going to take a shot and lose weight. 3 years ago now, maybe coming up on 3 years ago, I started doing it. I was like, oh my God, this is the thing Kelly was talking about. And just like that, it started happening. Now, of course, before that, they had other GLPs, right? Like Rybelsus, and there were like pills and stuff like that. It didn't really work quite as well. But now I'm seeing it help people in like such varied ways. I mean, no kidding. All the different ways that you see it impacting lives, that I can see it impacting my life. we talk so much about like trying to fix things for people. Like they just ate better. If there's no factory farming. And you start piling up all these if, and you realize like we're not getting any of this straight, right?
Right.
People keep suffering and they keep gaining weight and they keep being ill and they keep, just not having the lives they can. I'm not a person who's like put everybody on medication. I'm really not. But like now that I've seen what it's done for me, I'm not down with just yelling like you're cheating if you're doing this thing. Like, right. Like, I don't know why my body doesn't work the way it's supposed to, but it clearly doesn't. And you add this GLP to me and I'm better off. I don't like when people say to me like, oh, you're going to have to use it for the rest of your life. I'm like, whatever. I was like, because the other way I was going to have a heart attack for sure. So, whatever. And now you're talking about that pill. That pill might end up being more of a maintenance thing for someone like me, right? I used to hate ordering my daughter's diabetes supplies. I never had a good experience and it was frustrating. But it hasn't been that way for a while. Actually, for about 3 years now, because that's how long we've been using US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. US Med is the #1 distributor for Freestyle Libre systems nationwide. They are the #1 specialty distributor for Omnipod DASH, the #1 fastest growing Tandem distributor nationwide, the #1 rated distributor in Dexcom customer satisfaction surveys. They have served over 1 million people with diabetes since 1996, and they always provide 90 days worth of supplies and fast and free shipping. US Med carries everything from insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies to the latest CGMs like the Libre 3 and Dexcom G7. They accept Medicare nationwide and over 800 private insurers. Find out why US Med has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau at usmed.com/juicebox or just call them at 888-721-1514. Get started right now, and you'll be getting your supplies the same way we do.
It sounds like the pills may be a great option for maintenance or people with, let's say, less severe metabolic disease. They're not going to be as potent to start with. They're not going to be as potent as the injectables. They kind of tout that these high doses of high dose of Rybelsus, which is the oral semaglutide from Novo Nordisk for diabetes, is currently with the FDA for approval in high doses for what they're calling oral Wegovy, which is their injectable weight loss medication, their popular one. They are touting that those get up there, but still, I think most people are going to tolerate the shots, once weekly shots, better. But for maintenance, there's a whole lot of hosts and applications for these oral versions, and maintenance is definitely one big thing that they're looking at. But one of the things I want to touch on based upon kind of what you were just saying there, because I think you hit on something that I think is what needs to be understood when we talk about the discourse, the public discourse around GLP-1 medications and this idea of taking a drug forever or cheating or taking the easy way out. I just want to kind of reframe that conversation for people and just kind of build on what you were saying there is we can all agree that there are likely contributing factors, confounding factors in this country specifically that contribute to metabolic disease that are beyond just your own personal agency, right?
Sure.
We don't know how what they're spraying on our crops affects our gut microbiome. We don't know really how much or how little the prescription drugs that we're taking, we're learning more, are screwing with our gut microbiome. We don't know how much, for instance, alcohol screws with our gut microbiome. What they're finding right now, we're going to get data later this week, probably, maybe early next week from Novo Nordisk, that's likely to show that Rybelsus slows the progression of Alzheimer's. Why is that? Because they have found this gut-brain connection that they're just now starting to unwind. But these GLP-1 medications, all they are manufactured peptides that, and in Novo's case, they actually make it from yeast. They're peptides that mimic hormones that are naturally made in your gut. But there's byproducts of gut bacteria. There's byproducts of adipose tissue called DPP-4 that literally is run amok in the guts of people who are diabetic and obese. They've done studies on this. It's this DPP-4 enzyme that destroys GLP-1, native GLP-1 or endogenous GLP-1, GIP, these incretin hormones, right? And so a lot of what they're learning is this unique connection between the gut and the brain in terms of signaling satiety, signaling insulin release. And these hormones are integral to that. And you can imagine what's happening in the guts of people who have had their good bacteria destroyed or have high adiposity, where the environment there is working against your own native GLP-1. That's one of the reasons that these medications work so well is prior to GLP-1 medications, there was a whole nother class of type 2 diabetes medications called DPP-4 inhibitors. So that culprit that attacks your endogenous GLP-1, your endogenous, the Ozempic that your body makes naturally. Essentially, they had a drug that tried to block that DPP-4 so that your native GLP-1 could shine through and do its job, signal satiety, signal insulin release, stimulate the beta cells in your pancreas to release insulin more efficiently, et cetera. And so these medications are literally, and this is sort of one of the more controversial things that I'll say, is that I believe they are the antidote to whatever the culprit is. And it's probably many factors that are creating a hormonally dysregulated body for people who are metabolically sick.
Yeah, I don't know another way to explain it to you other than my body just works better now. And I mean, from like, I used to have terrible reflux, gone. Had it like most of my life, it's just gone. People will say, oh, it's because you lost weight? It was gone before I lost the weight. I used to be anemic all the time. Like, I'm telling you, Dave, like I was in the last handful of years of my life, I was getting 2 and sometimes 3 iron infusions a year so that my ferritin wouldn't drop off the planet. And I couldn't stand some days. Like I was so anemic. I haven't been anemic in almost 3 years. What happened? My expectation is my digestion changed. My body is now picking up nutrients differently and I'm not lacking in iron anymore. That's a simple thing. That to your bigger point about like, I'm sure there's a million things happening that are impacting us that we don't know about. I wasn't going to unwind all that in my lifetime, right? And even if I could, what am I going to go live in a yurt? Like, you know what I mean? Like grow a carrot in my own, like, I don't know, what was I going to do exactly, right? You're like, I got a house, I got kids, I got to live my life. This is the world I'm in right now. If the world's doing this to me, then, and there's an anecdote, you know, quote unquote to that, I'm in to take it because I wasn't going to live as long. My days were much less pleasant. I was never rested. The reflux gave me other issues that I'm hoping don't turn into bigger problems, right? Like there's a lot going on. And now all of a sudden, man, I'm full of energy. I got nothing but like clarity in my mind. Like, you know, I've worn a CGM a couple of times. My glucose doesn't move. Like you almost can't will it to move.
Yeah.
It's been so beneficial. And then we were able to, you know, like I think I told you before we started talking, I used it. My wife used it. Awesome results. My brother has type 2. I'm adopted, so not my brother by blood, but my brother, type 2 diabetes. He's lost like 70 pounds. His A1C's dropped way down, like 2 points down. And still he was with a doctor the other day who said to him, if I was you, I wouldn't be using this GLP medication. Awesome, man. Thanks. How come? Muscle. He kind of waved his hand at him and muscle wasting. And I was like, Brian, I'm like, GLPs don't magically make muscle go away. I'm like, they can give you, like, put you in situations that can cause that. And there's ways to counteract that. I was like, he's like, don't worry, I'm not going to stop taking this. And I was like, oh, okay. But like, it's amazing that like in 2025 now, there's still a doctor who's just like waving their hand randomly saying muscle out loud and telling a guy whose A1C went from the 7s to the 5s and lost 70 pounds, hey, you probably shouldn't be taking that. So that guy doesn't understand this functionally at all.
No.
And he's out there giving advice. So in a world where there are doctors giving advice that they don't know about, that, like you said, something's getting sprayed on something, I'm eating it, something in my stomach that medicine barely understands at this point,
right,
is getting dysregulated. Who cares, man? Like, you know, I tell people I have a GLP deficiency. That's what I tell them because it shuts them up. And like, and I don't really know what else to say.
I love it.
So when you see it back into this world a little bit with type 1, I know this isn't, you know, what your focus is on, but I feel like you might have a lot of information that's going to help otherwise. So if you don't have an answer, just say, Scott, I don't know. This isn't my lane. But when people talk about GLPs reducing inflammation, for example, do you understand, or does anyone understand how that happens, or do we just know it does happen?
I believe they're trying to untangle all of that and why it works too, especially on that inflammation. I know that with tirzepatide, they're doing some studies that are looking at the C-reactive protein, which is one of the biggest markers for inflammation in the body. They're seeing reduction in all of those. And in fact, the next sort of advent of where GLP-1s can take us, because honestly, they're going to have the weight problem solved in the next 10 years. There's going to be something for everyone, I firmly believe, out there that's going to get you to your goal weight more than likely. The question now becomes, how do we improve the quality of weight? To the doctor's point of muscle wasting, which that happens when you lose weight dramatically. I mean, these medications, the ones that are on the market currently, essentially help bring down your weight by reducing the amount of energy you put into your body. And so if you're reducing the energy you put in, that's how you get weight loss. But unfortunately, with weight loss, you're losing a certain amount of muscle mass. So the quality of weight loss is what they're looking at in the future pipeline of these medications, but they're also looking at other indications, because there's people like you who walk around and say, actually, this is how it helped me. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and all of a sudden I don't need my rheumatoid arthritis medication, or I have, irritable bowel syndrome and it's cleared up. Like all these things that really at the heart of it, are inflammatory drivers in the body. And then, so they're looking at that and they're looking at combining these medications with other treatments for some of those autoimmune diseases. So autoimmune diseases are kind of the next frontier of where they're looking, specifically with tirzepatide, because one of the things we call these medications GLP-1 medications, but at the end of the day, everything up until tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro and Zepbound, was just a GLP. Mounjaro, tirzepatide, the active ingredient, is actually two hormones in the family of, they're called incretins. They're nutrient stimulated hormones. In other words, you eat food and your body releases these. When your gut starts to sense the nutrients, it releases these hormones naturally. GIP is another prominent one. Is actually, I think they discovered GIP before they discovered GLP-1, but it's a combination of both. And it's mostly a GIP medicine with just a little bit of GLP-1, where like Ozempic, semaglutide is just straight GLP-1. Not super important, but for the purposes of what you're talking about with inflammation, what they're finding is that GIP has a profound effect on inflammation in maybe some ways that GLP-1 doesn't. These molecules have protective properties in the body that they're just starting to understand. And these properties are independent of weight loss. So, for example, one of my favorite pieces of data on semaglutide, which is, becoming kind of like an old school drug. And when you talk about Ozempic, they're like, hey, have you heard of Mounjaro? It's even better. But when you look at GLP-1 receptor agonism, in the biggest study for semaglutide, which was called the SELECT trial, was in cardiac stuff, right? So it was looking at people with heart failure. And then it was looking at major cardiovascular outcomes. In this trial, there was some tens of thousands of people were enrolled in this trial, and it lasted for 4 years. And what they found was it didn't matter what dose of semaglutide you took, and it didn't matter how much or if you lost weight. You experienced a 20% reduction in major cardiovascular events, a 20% reduction in deaths associated with major cardiovascular events. And so what they thought in that trial, or one of the things they were extrapolating, was there's something specifically protective in the heart about the GLP-1 molecule. And so researchers spun off a smaller study that just came out a couple of weeks ago. And this is just in rodents. But what they did is they took the first GLP-1 that ever came out. It's called Byetta. Really cool story about how they discovered that one, because in the 1960s, and maybe it was the 70s, they discovered this thing called the incretin effect. We call these the incretin drugs, right? They discovered that, hey, when you inject somebody with glucose, and when you feed somebody with glucose, there's actually a quicker metabolic response when you feed it to people and they ingest it through their stomach and their gut rather than injecting it. And they called this the incretin effect. That's because these hormones, like I said, are nutrient stimulated, but they lack the ability to, create duplicate peptides of ones that were already in your body. And so through research, these doctors were looking at the venom of Gila monsters because they found that it lowered blood sugar. And then they isolated a peptide in the venom of a Gila monster and found that it nearly mimicked exactly human GLP-1, except instead of lasting for just a few minutes in the body and getting destroyed by DPP-4, they could make it last for 4 hours. Right. So that's how they came up with the first GLP-1. So this study with the rodents actually looked at exenatide, which was the first GLP-1. They basically gave it to these rodents and induced a heart attack. And there were two subsets of these rodents. There were the kind that got the GLP-1, and then there were the kind that actually got a version of exenatide that actually blocks the GLP-1 receptors. And so there's these cells on the hearts. They're called parasites. They found that the rodent population that got GLP-1 receptor agonism injected into them, along with the heart attack, it opened up the blood flow to the part of the heart that otherwise would have been damaged permanently. And conversely, in the rodents that got the GLP-1 blocker, that part of the heart stayed forever damaged. It never got the blood restored to it. So long way around saying that there's something that's protective about these molecules themselves, independent of the weight loss. Mm-hmm. And to our earlier points, there's something within our ecosystem here that has caused dysregulation in these hormones. And I believe that's why you're seeing people that get on these medications, even ones that don't have like a tremendous amount of weight to lose and maybe even none. And they're just microdosing because they've read the studies and they want to get some of these benefits, that they're saying, my psoriasis is going away. My arthritis is getting better. Fill in the blank. There's so many things.
I haven't had an eczema flare in years.
Wow.
I used to have it it just occurred to me as you're saying it, like this time of year, as it starts to get colder, I would get these red patches on the inside of my thighs and sometimes on the back of my arms. And I haven't had them in years. Mm. No kidding. Yeah. I just heard you say I'm going to live forever, Dave. Thank you.
Basically.
I appreciate it.
That's what I was getting at.
I only had plans for the next 20 years. I'll have to figure something else out. It's interesting. You're younger than me. And it's really, let me say before I say this, it's really interesting talking to you. What did you do before this professionally?
I sold traffic signals.
That's amazing, man.
It's a natural transition.
Yeah, I love that when you're talking about it. I'd be thrilled if my doctor understood this as well as you did. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's so cool. I brought this up in the beginning, but it so kind of mimics me a little bit. Like, I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, but I try learning all the time. And what this job allows me to do is it allows me to be steeped in it constantly.
Yeah.
And I think we need more people who just spend a lot of time in an idea absorbing it, So very cool that you're doing this and that you can speak about it so well.
Appreciate that.
But what I was saying is, like, when I was growing up, I've said this before on here, all the time, like the biggest problem people had was their weight. Like, oh my God, if medicine would just figure out weight, if they would just figure out weight, like the society just wanted it. They begged for it. And then we gave it to them and people are like, you're a cheater. And I'm like, oh my God, people are fickle. Fascinating. But okay, we get past that. The other thing I've been hearing,
get your weight down, but not that way.
Not like that. Do it the way you're supposed to. Like Jack.
And there's also like what drives me insane is there's also an assumption that people are just taking the medicine and they're not also going to the gym. They're not also watching what they eat. Like, these medicines don't just magically work for everyone. Most of the people, we have 160,000 people in the OTP community across the platforms. There are very few people, if any, that I've met that are like, I just let the drug do the work. They're all in the gym.
Also, I want to say, if that's what they did, like, God, like, it's their life. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if they're better off, let them be better off. My point about the weight is that's all society talks about. It's like, we got to help people with their weight. And the other thing I hear people talking about my whole life is inflammation. Inflammation's such a problem. It's such a problem. We can't, and I believe it, by the way, like, you can't take an NSAID every 5 minutes, but you've had issues. You take an Advil, it reduces the inflammation in your body. And you're like, oh, this is better now.
Right.
Some people have it more chronically. I watch my daughter, who obviously has, an autoimmune issue, but she also has she has hypothyroidism. She has type 1 diabetes. She might have PCOS. And I'm telling you that when she's on this medication, things are better for her. Like, they just are. And I have a giant community of people who are reporting back very similar, returns. And they're a little blocked because, of course, in the studies, they found that, people with type 1 diabetes were going to DKA sometimes. And it's really, I think it turns out to be just because they eat less and they're using less insulin. And then they ended up in DKA because they type 1 and they need insulin and they weren't using enough. They didn't have their settings changed. Because with my daughter, I've never had that problem. When she's using the GLP, you just have to titrate back her basal. You'd be surprised how much of her, how wide her settings can swing. Without a GLP, it could take 1 unit of insulin to move my daughter's blood sugar 34 points. but on a microdose of GLP, 1 unit of insulin will move her blood sugar 95 points. Wow. That's insane, right? Like she's involved in some sort of insulin resistance or inflammation in her body. I don't even care. Like I genuinely don't even care what you call it. It doesn't matter to me. Like I see what happens. Then I talk to other people who are having other, issues. And then everybody that comes on here, you didn't start this way, but if you came on and you had type 1, I'd say, hey, do you have any other autoimmune issues? How about in your family? And people sit down, they go, oh, I got celiac, there's vitiligo. I have a friend of mine's got eczema. There's a lot of allergies, hypothyroidism. Like it runs through their family lines. And I just imagine and believe that these people are experiencing a higher level of inflammation, like just generally speaking. Like, so if this leads to, I don't know, 10 years from now, them coming out with something else that just lowers people's inflammation a little bit, I think this is awesome. Like, what was I seeing the other day? My brother was sick, I told you. And he's got a virus. And it's just not passing quickly. And so they put him on a steroid pack. But by the way, like he had to beat him over the head to even get the steroids. Like that won't help you. Like, be arguing with him. He finally gets a steroid pack. He's on the steroids for a couple hours. He calls me and goes, Scott, I feel so much better. Like all the pain's going away, blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, did you know that in the 40s, when steroids became, when they figured them out and they started using them for a split second, they thought they had literally fixed all the problems mankind had. And until you realize what happens if you stay on these steroid packs too long and you get rebound and it's not great, right? There's a lot of problems if you stay on them too long. But still, when you're on them in that short window, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I feel like Superman when I'm on a steroid pack. I'm almost excited when I'm sick. I'm like, oh my God, they're going to give me a steroid pack. Next week of my life's going to be awesome. Man, imagine that. Like, imagine if this stuff leads to not just people losing weight, people's A1Cs dropping out of a diabetic range, type 1s hopefully needing less insulin, people with autoimmune having less impacts from their autoimmune issues. And what if they could get rid of like some of this inflammation for people?
Absolutely. I one of the things that I've been saying for a couple of years too, that has been, one of the more controversial things in terms of just the feedback that I get from people is I really believe these medications, these incretin nutrient stimulated hormones, however you want to couch them, we'll call them GLP-1s because that's what everybody else does. But I believe they have the power to save our healthcare system in the United States. And when this new administration came in, there was a lot of people who were very nervous within our community about how they were going to treat GLP-1s because there was a lot of like anti-Ozempic talk before they came in. And I was just like hoping beyond hope that once they got in and really looked at the data objectively and maybe, took their political hats off and put on their data hats, that they would see what we have been seeing in this community for so long, that these medications really have the power at the right price to transform the health in this country. Because again, we have these drugs have been out for a long time. That's another like misnomer that people have, is that they're brand new. They're not. The diet has been around for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And so we have lots of years of data with these drugs on the market that we can go back and comb. I don't know how much your audience gets in the weeds on like clinical trial data, but they have these studies called post-marketing studies. So you have phase 1 to make sure that, animals don't die when you inject them with something. Right. And then they put them in phase 2, small human trials. And then phase 3 is the last one before it gets approved, the bigger trials to figure out dosing and et cetera. Well, they have these phase 4 trials once something comes to market where they're able to just aggregate data, right? All these patient records and say, here's these 20 million people that are on GLP-1s. What they're seeing in almost every single major medicine journal has showed lower CRP, lower IL-6, lower TNF alpha, what these are doing to fatty liver disease and metabolic health directly by mechanisms of reducing liver fat and even reversing fibrosis stages. What they're showing is that, like, can you imagine the downstream effects? Even just the 20% reduction of major cardiovascular events with semaglutide, and the reduction in hospitalization. So I don't think it can be understated what just happened last week, or maybe it's a couple weeks now, with the administration getting the pharmaceutical drug companies to the table and saying, hey, like, let's work on volume here. Almost my own personal held belief that almost everyone who lives in this country should be considering the idea of talking to their doctor about whether one of these medications could benefit them in some way.
Dave, I got to tell you, I think for a minute people thought like that Lilly and Novo were sending money over here, because I was like, let's spray it out of airplanes. Mm-hmm. You're seeing like so many people. You know what I realized when I talk to people over and over again, and this is interesting, right? Is that I don't think people think they're eating poorly. Like, I think when you really like, it's easy to step back and like say, oh, like poo-poo, people don't take good care of themselves, or like, you know, you act like those bro podcasters, like who's going to row the boat, all that stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Right. Like it's easy to say work harder, do better. Like, you know, the last thing I need is a guy making $20 million a year telling me I got a cold plunge in the morning. I'm like, I'm at work. Like, I don't, you know, like, thanks. Big help, man. Thank you.
Right.
When I look at people, I don't think people are out there doing a poor job on purpose. And I think, moreover, I don't think they know they are if they are. Right. Around nutrition, around other health issues. I talk to people all the time. They're not like, oh, you know I'm making bad decisions all day long. You know, I have extra money to buy better food, but I just decided to buy crack with it instead. Like people are doing their best in the system that they have, in the life that they have. No one wants to be unhealthy. Like I find like calling people, there's a thing they do in type 1 is if you don't have the outcomes that the doctors want, they tell you that you're non-compliant. Yeah. We told you what to do and you're not complying. I talk to people all the time. I don't find people to be non-compliant at all. They're trying as hard as they can with their understanding and their tools and their finances and their insurance and all the other things that they have, and their time, by the way, Dave, because they get up in the morning and they got kids and they got to vacuum and they got to go to school and they got to go to work. And like, nobody's got time to sit and talk about this like we do. Like, right. Like, you know, so telling people do better. And then when they don't do better, go, well, you must not be trying hard enough. I guess you deserve to die. What a bizarre thing to do to people. And we're out here saying there's not enough food for people. We can't do small farming because we have to make food for so many people. You know how much less food I eat now? I'm fine. You know what I mean? Like I don't eat like in bulk the way I used to. You can't even. I mean, you ever go out? My wife and I go out together. Sometimes we order a dish and we split it, and we still don't fit it, and we're nice and full and healthy and everything's okay. My point is that if there's all this inflammation and all this autoimmune and all this weight and all the other things that are impacting people, I want those people to open their minds up more. Like this is what I you know. At the pharma level, at the doctor's level, like listen to what people are saying and look at your patients and say, like, could I be helping them with this? Right? Like, do I want the world to be fixed another way? Like, should Monsanto not spray whatever they spray on my wheat? Like, yeah, awesome. I don't know how to impact that, you know, but on my side, I know what's working for me. And honestly, I don't even understand trust me, I'm making this up right now. I wish they'd mix it into the insulin. I heard you talking.
They are, by the way. Yeah, like Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly, I think both have clinical trials combining GLP with insulin.
Dave, you don't know me well. I'm going to cry. It's fucking awesome, man. My daughter has a needle phobia. She's a lot of trouble taking the GLPs. I sit in here and I stare at it and I wonder, like, I want to be clear, I wouldn't do this. But like, there's this little part of me that wants to just squirt some of the GLP into the insulin because it'll go into her pump and help her. And I know, but trust me, don't do that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that like, I'm like, God, why can't they just do that a little bit? Like, look what it does for her. Like, how much less insulin would she need? Because also the dosing is all screwy. Yeah. Probably you can explain it to me better, but like the dosing, the way the pens are set up, right? Like it's what told them would work, right? If they spread it over the population, like most people will have some success at this, but there are plenty of people who do 2.5 and they go, oh, it made me nauseous. I couldn't keep doing it. But 1.25 might have been perfect for them. I'm saying, like, open up the dosing to people. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Let them make their own decisions about how much they get. Anyway.
I think one of the cool things that has happened unintentionally, like an unintentional consequence of those really early shortages of these medications, was that it opened up the world of compound medications and personalized medication. I don't know how much you get into the compound world over here, but really, essentially, a quick flyover is in this country, when a drug comes to market that's not a biologic, if the manufacturer can't keep up, we have this system called compound pharmacies, 503A and 503B compound pharmacies that can basically step in and make and sell to doctors who prescribe them to patients drugs that are in shortage. So you sort of bypass the intellectual property at that point. One of the interesting things that's happened is it spurred this whole telehealth world where doctors are prescribing GLPs on a personal level, and they're actually prescribing microdose versions of these drugs. Because again, we're never going to get a trial. Clinical trials are designed by the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
They want you taking more of their drugs. So first of all, just know that about a clinical trial is that it's funded by the pharmaceutical companies that run them. But second of all, when you look at what they're trying to accomplish in a clinical trial, especially for obesity and diabetes, in diabetes, they're looking at A1C, type 2 diabetes, they're looking at A1C reduction. And in obesity, and I'm talking about this because this is my world, though type 1 world isn't the world that I live in. In obesity, they're just trying to slam you with as much medicine as possible to balance side effects and get the maximum amount of weight loss, because that's what Wall Street wants. And so really, clinical trials are designed they're designed for regulators and they're designed for investors. They're not really designed for patients. And we're starting to see a shift in that. But because the shortages led to this world of compounding, you have now millions of people who have gotten the benefits of getting on a individualized dose of these medications and finding that 2.5 milligrams of tirzepatide is the starting dose commercially. But I just being a figurative random person, took 10% of that a week and got similar benefits, And so we're seeing in the real world, this sort of situation play out where we're starting to see like a massive sort of non-traditional clinical trial going on, showing that these peptides specifically have benefit for a lot of people outside of the normal dosing that we got from the clinical trials, including but not limited to microdosing. And
the way I see with my daughter and with myself, so I first learned it with myself, is that I'm sure most people who use these drugs will tell you this. I'm on Zepbound. I do 12 and a half, right?
Okay.
I shoot it usually on Saturdays or Sundays. By Thursday, I start thinking about like, maybe I should order a pizza tonight. Like on Wednesday, I'd never think that. On Friday, I actually could get a pizza. I can only eat a slice of it or so, but like the whole process, like I can feel it let go in my brain a little bit. Like, I don't know another way to put this unless you've been on these. Like the best way I can explain it to people is that my brain doesn't tell me I'm hungry and my stomach doesn't tell me I'm hungry. I need to remind myself to eat. It was tough to do in the beginning, by the way. I set alarms in the beginning, like have breakfast now, eat this, make sure you have protein, like that kind of stuff. But then I said, okay, so obviously the life of this drug in my body, it wanes. It's not completely gone, but it wanes. Even I could see like weight loss first 4 days, and it maybe drifts back a little bit in the last 3 days and everything. So I'm looking at my daughter. And again, the issue is with her not wanting to do the injections. But, we started with a 2.5 Mounjaro pen for her. Because, by the way, my daughter has a dual diagnosis. She has a type 1 diagnosis and an insulin resistance diagnosis. So she gets Mounjaro through her insurance. 2.5 is too much. She'll lose too much weight. She's never hungry. It's way too much for her. But you can't argue with the fact that her A1C is like 5.2 and her blood sugar won't spike over like 150, like no matter what she's eating, right? Even if she can, she talked herself into eating through not being hungry. And so one day I'm like, this is not sustainable. And so I learned about microdosing, bought some vials on Amazon, injected the pen into the vial. I didn't know how much was in there, so I drew it all out and I converted it to insulin units, basically, because I had insulin needles. And I'm like, all right, well, there's this many units in here. The whole of it is too much. I'll try giving her half. And then every week I'd try giving her like an insulin unit less and trying to look for a sweet spot where she could get a week's worth of coverage on her insulin resistance and her insulin usage. But the truth is, it should probably be shot even less than that, like every 4 or 5 days, because of the life of it.
Yeah.
It's a struggle, man. You should see. Like, I know it's a weird thing to say that a type 1 is like, has like a visceral fear of injections, but she does, right?
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah. And so, but I know if she didn't, I know if somebody else was here and we could mess around with it a little bit, I know there's an amount she should get. And I know we could figure out the pacing of it, and it would be much less, maybe more frequently. And I think it would change your life.
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
So 2 things that I would just posit to you as something to muse on over the next week. The first thing is that with tirzepatide, if that's the molecule that she wants to stick with, There are compounding pharmacies who do make it in oral form. That said, they're not FDA approved. They're not FDA inspected for, it's compounded medication. So it by nature is outside of the FDA system, but it's still a prescription you get from a doctor and take under doctor supervision. There are sublinguals. And so these compound pharmacies have found a way to protect these peptides and make them orally bioavailable. But the question is, we don't know how much because they've never gone through clinical trials. And frankly, the pharmaceutical companies pay billions of dollars for technology to make peptides orally bioavailable. But if you can set that aside and know that is an option that you could explore and talk to her doctor about. The second is when we talk about tirzepatide specifically on the injectable side, the interesting thing about tirzepatide is the half-life on tirzepatide is like 5 days on average, where semaglutide is 7. And so it's pretty normal for those effects to sort of fall off a cliff towards the end of that week when you're getting a couple days away from injection day. And I firmly believe, to build on our earlier conversation about clinical trials, they chose 7 days because 7 days is easier for people to manage.
Yeah.
Not because it's ideal for the patient. And again, it's easier for the insurance companies. It's easier for the pharmacies. It's easier for the manufacturers. So just 4 pens, 1 month, once a week.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's probably not what's best for the patient every time.
Do you know there's actual human problem in that too, which is that when people feel better, one of the first things they do is stop doing the thing that helps them feel better.
100%.
Yeah,
right.
That's very common. So
right.
You're in a terrible conundrum. You start taking this injection 3 months later, your whole life's different. And then, you get to Saturday and you're like, you don't even remember, you don't feel well. And you don't think about the pen. It's in the back of the refrigerator. And there's different issues there. So do you think that in my daughter's example, as I explained it, she'd be better off on Ozempic?
I don't know because the tirzepatide again is more GIP than it is GLP-1. It's a different hormone that it's focused on. Although it's 2, it's more so a GIP. And so it's going to be a different experience on semaglutide, Ozempic, than it is on Mounjaro. And so I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that she may experience, and if she gets similar effects on the blood sugar control side from semaglutide, that theoretically it should last longer because the half-life of the drug is longer.
Yeah.
But it does seem to me like when you look at the studies, I can't remember what they actually are in type 2 diabetics. So you can look at the Surpass study for Mounjaro, and you can look at can't remember what the one for Wegovy or for Ozempic was off the top of my head, but you can look at them and it'll show you that Mounjaro is better at controlling A1C. And I think it's because of that GIP mechanism. But you may get a steadier peak and trough of the concentration of the drug with Ozempic just because of that 7-day half-life.
That sounds like maybe if I wait, I can get Humalog with GLP and GIP in it.
I can't remember. Yeah. I can look it up here, but insulin, Novo Nordisk, it's insulin Icodec. Does that sound right? Insulin Icodec. There's one that they're looking at with Novo Nordisk, and I don't know. It's the insulin Icodec is a once weekly, right? Just like Ozempic is.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it's supposed to give, a smoother experience for somebody taking it and less sort of variability in the peaks and troughs of that. And so they're looking at combining it with GLP-1.
Listen, hopefully it gets there for people who could be helped. I'll say this too. I've seen people on type 1s who use it and it doesn't touch their insulin needs at all. And that always makes me wonder, are these people who have type 1 diabetes but don't have other metabolic issues?
I wonder too if it just really comes down to what level of beta cell function you have, if any. Because in some really small clinical studies, they've shown clinically that they can give type 1 diabetics GLP-1 semaglutide, and they come on, like 90% of them come off all of their insulin at the right doses. But this was a small trial, and you have to have some level of beta cell function in order to have that happen, because you have to be able to rely on your own insulin.
Yeah, it makes me think about this researcher I interviewed like 15 years ago who was like positive. She was like, I sometimes feel like the beta cells aren't dead. They're like so inflamed that they can't work, is how she put it. And I'm wondering, that's a very layman's remembrance of her conversation. But right. I do wonder, somewhere in there's a lot of things to be learned. Hopefully those companies are digging in labs on all of this stuff, right? Because, I hear people all the time say like, well, they'll put themselves out of business. I'm like, the truth is, if you took care of all the problems people had and that's what put you out of business, I think you'd have enough money to make it. Mm-hmm. There's that kind of cynical, like they want to have some of the money forever. I think if you got all the money right now, they'd probably be happy to, turn that money into a bank and stop being a pharma company and on your way. I also don't want them to go out of business. Obviously, it's a weird balance, right? Like to your point, like, they're out there, they're doing this work and they're also trying to maximize their profits. It's hard to argue that. I mean, I understand what they're doing. We don't want them not out there. And, you also want them making money and hiring good people. And it would also be nice if this stuff was affordable for people who were really, in the trenches and needed it every day. I mean, honestly, $500, it's down to $500 a month now for people. And people are like, oh, it's cheaper. I'm like, oh my God, that's still so expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. But the good news is that with the addition of GLPs for obesity to Medicare recipients are going to pay $50 a month for it. The government arbitrated their price down to $250. Mm-hmm. And so Medicare patients will get it for a $50 copay. Medicaid's going to follow because they're going to get the same pricing. So most states will follow and those folks won't even pay a copay. And then for the rest of the people, the deal with the most favored nations is that you'll be able to cash pay these things over the next 24 months to get these down. Both Wegovy, which is the obesity version of Ozempic, and Zepbound, the obesity version of Mounjaro, you'll be able to get those both for $250 within the next 24 months, and the price just came down on the cash pay.
Well, then I'm thinking everybody should buy stock in companies that make clothes like bras and underwear and stuff that.
Oh yeah,
because you have any idea how many times I've donated my clothes and had to rebuy stuff over the last 2 years? Like it's.
Oh yeah. There's a huge clothes swap market that goes on within the community of people who use these drugs.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Well, so Dave, I thank you. I've taken up a lot of your time. I wondered, do you see it? I don't know, an avenue here where you and I could get back together and do this every once in a while? Like this is my world. I love talking about this stuff. I love talking to other people who are passionate about health. And frankly, I just like talking to other lay people that, like you said, steeped in this stuff, immersed in it every day. We've learned about this stuff because we're passionate and we have skin in the game ourselves. And I just think it helps a lot of people to hear from other people like us. So I would love to do more of this if you're willing to. We're going to have to find an overlap with my audience's needs and your skill set and your knowledge and find a way to do. We can do that. We'll do that offline.
For sure. Yeah. There's a lot of people in the On the Pen community who are type 1 and they're pining for more information just like you are on this stuff because everything is so focused on type 2 and obesity. And they're saying, wait, my husband went on Mounjaro and he's a type 1 and he's off his insulin or he was able to greatly reduce his insulin. What are the trials saying? And there's just been very little in terms of looking at GLP-1s with type 1. But I think that's because it's such a spectrum of disease in terms of how severe it is for people. So it's hard to put together probably clinical trials for it.
Well, yeah, also, and it's scary to say out loud too, because you don't want to give people the idea that if they just took enough of this, their type 1 diabetes would stop needing insulin, because that's not going to be the case for a great many people. And obviously they would be impacted very poorly with their health for not taking their insulin. You don't want that to be confused. And you also don't want people not to look into it.
Right.
There's something there. Like I think I told you before we started, I've had a gentleman on who's, type 1, and he's definitely type 1. People are like, well, maybe he wasn't, but he's definitely type 1. He has autoantibodies. He, been using insulin for years. They put him on Mounjaro or, Zepbound for weight, and he literally came off his insulin. Now, he doesn't expect that's going to be forever, but it is for now, and no one knows why. It's not because GLP cures type 1 diabetes, which is how, simple black and white thinking ends up getting, people get very reactive when you say stuff like that. But I've also had, 15-year-old girl, her mom came on to talk about how her insulin needs went down. She was using 1 unit of basal a day. She had to go off her pump. She's an injected unit of basal a day. She's back on a pump now, but it lasted her 2 years, 2 years where she wasn't taking a ton of insulin. Great. Somebody needs to be asking, what happened there? You know what I mean? What was the functionality there? That's the stuff I want people looking into. I don't think that if you just gave a type 1 enough GLP, they'd stop needing insulin. Like, no one's saying that. Like, I think you can hear there's a bigger conversation here about other impacts on your life. And even if it just makes something better for you, I think it's really valuable to hear about more of it.
Right.
And then there's the functional side of it, like actually implementing it. You can start shooting this into people who don't really understand their insulin. Like, we've talked a lot today about, like, it would be nice if people could dose it themselves. Mm-hmm. Insulin's a thing that type 1s dose themselves all day long. And trust me, Dave, between me and you, they're not great at it. The doctors aren't great at giving you the right doses, and people aren't great at making the adjustments they need to make for a lot of good reasons. And just flopping them on a GLP and reducing their needs right away, they might struggle to get their insulin like readjusted, which will cause them a lot of problems. And some of those problems could be, a dangerous hyperglycemia. And obviously you don't want that too. And then you get into that more functional human problem of, like, how do you put this into practice? And I mean, I don't have any answers for that, but for the people who can figure out how to do it on their own and you feel like you're up to the task, I'd look into this if I was you. So anyway.
100%.
All right.
Everything, I think you probably would echo this. Everything that I share as a lay person here about this stuff, we just want people to have better conversations with their doctor. And so that's always my hope whenever I share any of the information that I've learned is just, you heard about a study, you heard about a drug, you heard about something that might help, go talk to your doctor about it. And if your doctor doesn't know about it, ask them to know about it.
Yeah.
Or find somebody that does.
Dave, I don't think there's any doubt that shows like yours and shows like mine, I think they push innovation forward because people can find out about things sooner. Like, 40 years ago, like, you'd be like, do you have Pat? She lives like 3 doors down. She's taking the GLP. That would take years for that to spread through the neighborhood. But that wouldn't help anybody, right? Like, you can yell it out loud now and have 10,000, 20,000, 1 million people hear it. And you're not trying to make them do something. You're trying to make them go home and quietly go, I wonder, what should I be asking for myself on this? And I think that's why this podcast works for people with type 1 too, because I don't see a lot of difference between what we're talking about here and what ends up happening to people when they're diagnosed with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, honestly. Like, you get sent home with, like, here, take metformin, you'll be fine. That's it? That's what you're going to tell me? So anyway, I appreciate this very much. Let me say goodbye to you and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Omnipod 5. Omnipod 5 is a tube-free automated insulin delivery system that's been shown to significantly improve A1C and time in range for people with type 1 diabetes when they've switched from daily injections. Learn more and get started today at omnipod.com/juicebox. At my link, you can get a free starter kit right now. Terms and conditions apply. Eligibility may vary. Full terms and conditions can be found at omnipod.com/juicebox. Today's episode is also sponsored by usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Get started today and get your supplies from US Med. A huge thanks to Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget, Black Friday has come early at CozyEarth.com. Right now, you can stack my code JUICEBOX on top of their site-wide sale. This is going to give you up to 40% off in savings, and these deals are definitely not going to last. I'm talking about sheets, towels, clothing, everything they have. Get that holiday shopping going right now today. Do it. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. If you're not already subscribed or following the podcast in your favorite audio app like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do that now. Seriously, just to hit follow or subscribe will really help the show. If you go a little further in Apple Podcasts and set it up so that it downloads all new episodes, I'll be your best friend. And if you leave a 5-star review, I'll probably send you a Christmas card. Would you like a Christmas card? Hey, I'm dropping in to tell you about a small change being made to the Juice Cruise 2026 schedule. This adjustment was made by Celebrity Cruise Lines, not by me. Anyway, we're still going out on the Celebrity Beyond cruise ship, which is awesome. Check out the walkthrough video at juiceboxpodcast.com/juicecruise. The ship is awesome. It's still a 7-night cruise. It still leaves out of Miami on June 21st. Actually, most of this is the same. We leave Miami June 21st, head to Coco Cay in the Bahamas. But then we're going to San Juan, Puerto Rico instead of St. Thomas. After that, Bastyrier, I think I'm saying that wrong, St. Kitts and Nevis. This place is gorgeous. Google it. I mean, you're probably going to have to go to my link to get the correct spelling because my pronunciation is so bad. But once you get the St. Kitts and you Google it, you're going to look and see a photo that says to you, oh, I want to go there. Come meet other people living with type 1 diabetes, from caregivers to children to adults. Last year, we had 100 people on our cruise, and it was fabulous. You can see pictures again at my link, juiceboxpodcast.com/juicecruise. You can see those pictures from last year there. The link also gives you an opportunity to register for the cruise or to contact Suzanne from Cruise Planners. She takes care of all the logistics. I'm just excited that I might see you there. It's a beautiful event for families, for singles, a wonderful opportunity to meet people, swap stories, make friendships, and learn. If you're new to type 1 diabetes, begin with the Bold Beginnings series from the podcast. Don't take my word for it. Listen to what reviewers have said. Bold Beginnings is the best first step. I learned more in those episodes than anywhere else. This is when everything finally clicked. People say it takes the stress out of the early days and replaces it with clarity. They tell me this should come with the diagnosis packet that I got at the hospital. And after they listen, they recommend it to everyone who's struggling. It's straightforward, practical, and easy to listen to. Bold Beginnings gives you the basics in a way that actually makes sense. The Juicebox Podcast is edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com. If you'd like your podcast to sound as good as mine, check out Rob at WrongWayRecording.com.